I'm going to ask you if we're going through a paradigm shift. Because if we are going through a paradigm shift, then one of the signs of a paradigm shift is that the language of the old paradigm cannot describe the new paradigm. You can't use the language of a typewriter to describe the internet. And it seems to me that when we're facing these incredibly complex and challenging global events that we are all subject to, we're still talking almost in linear language about non-linear and complex issues. So my question is, are we actually hiding from the truth by not recognizing just the sheer level of complexity and impact and disruption about what we're facing? And are we pretending that we can actually face that using, basically for many people, the same frameworks we were using not only in the 2015s, but the 1990s and 1970s even? So conceptually, are we keeping up with the cutting edge wave of the things we're facing? So you're welcome to discuss that. You're welcome to completely ignore that and talk about something else. Let's bring you in, Constantina. Let's bring you in.
Thank you. I'm actually going to address the question, and thank you for it. And I'll also try to answer the comments on spatial planning as well. I was going to say before your question, but I think it's relevant for me to start like that. But I think it's important to unpack who is the we when we're saying, we are talking, we are planning, we are in cities. And I think that is related to the question on whether we are in a paradigm shift. Because to me, we could be, we need to be, but there is also the additional question as to where are we heading? And the example I wanted to use by unpacking the we is that there is a big question at the government level, I would argue, of risk acceptance. And this is related to, I would say, even ideological approaches to development. When we are, how much are we ready to accept when it comes to losing our rights? COVID brought a big conversation in the EU around that. How do you deal with crisis? Because we lost our democratic rights to freedom of movement, among others, which is very fundamental in the EU. And we as citizens, was everyone in that, but we were not all at the same level of risk during COVID. And we are not at the same level of risk when we're thinking about future challenges. This is related, and I think Duncan brought it in, Karina brought it in, to the social vulnerabilities, access to information, access to resources, how rich you are or how poor you are. So whether, this is how I go back to the paradigm shift, in my opinion, in the 21st century, defending democracy is related to risk management and resilience building. And whether we as a society are going to go that way or a different way where we start talking about how many people are we going to lose, who has the right to survive, and this is related also to technology and use of data and kind of bigger questions as to, allow me this parenthesis, even social services planning. I often wonder in a personal level, are we going to be facing a reality in the future where if I'm fat or if I'm consuming more, I will be paying more the social services because I'm not eating well? And how ethical is that? For me, we are in a paradigm shift because we are facing these kind of societal and existential questions, I would say, and where are we going to head is a question. And at the moment, to me, the signals are not very promising. When it comes to urban planning, there is, I would say, a very positive. Well, first of all, I believe what I just mentioned, again, is related to urban planning. And as Duncan said, to the right to the city, right to the public spaces, as opposed to privatization of spaces, as opposed to use of, free use of beaches. In Greece, we had almost 100 people dying, and they were in a fire a few years ago, and they were about 5 meters away from the sea, and they couldn't access it because it was all blocked by private. This is a key resilience question, and it's a key I would say, urban planning question as well. There are, I would say, policies, as for example, in the EU, the new Bauhaus policy connects accessibility to beauty and to green. And then a final example that's related to unpacking the we and also to, different levels of policies has to do with access to energy. And also whether consuming energy and producing energy through sustainable resources is the same as actually reducing emissions and reducing consumption needs. And again, it is related to development and urban development patterns. I try to kind of touch it from the social dimension as well as the kind of technical dimensions. We can then use in a third round. I want to use some examples from different cities that I think speak to that. As I mentioned in our conversation yesterday, I think Glasgow is a brilliant example. And I'm honored to have worked with Duncan and to listen still how really Glasgow embeds into its design and its planning these kind of key social questions. And I will stop here. Thank you.
Konstantin, thank you for that. The thing about it is as we discussed yesterday, I see, Ian, you got your hand up. I'm going to bring Karina in next. Ian, I'll bring you in after that. But as we discussed yesterday, if you want to be fit, it helps if you are fundamentally healthy. If you're fundamentally unhealthy, it's difficult to get fit. If you want to have resilience, you need to have a healthy society to build on. And as you said, and I agree with you, we're seeing a movement away from equality and inclusion. And we're seeing disenfranchisement of significant portions. This is not minorities, of significant portions of the community. Communities feel completely disengaged and disempowered. And it is very hard to see how you can build a resilient society based on the word that Duncan used, trust and inclusivity in that. And it seems to me that we have a conversation, there's a divergence. Although we speak about resilience, and we've been speaking about resilience for the last 15 years at least, actually our society seems much more fragile, much more fractured and fragile and susceptible to failure than they did 20 years ago, 30 years ago. So it seems to me that we have a disconnect there. But once again, fascinating points to cover. Karina, let's bring you in, and then we'll bring you in, Ian, for very quickly, and we'll come back round to you, Duncan. If anybody else would like to come in, feel free to raise your hand, and we will bring you in. Karina.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to continue that discussion around the sort of paradigm shift. And I guess I'll start off with a quote by Richard Feynman. It is in the admission of ignorance and the admission of uncertainty that there is hope for the continuous motion of human beings in some direction that doesn't get confined, permanently blocked, as it has so many times in various periods of history of man or humankind, to be more gender inclusive. But I think what kind of building off the back of it, I don't think there needs to be a paradigm change in the sense that it's already happened. Like, we've been through the whole general systems theory thinking. We've been through systems. We've then been through complexity and understanding the emergence and the adaptation and the emergence of things that we cannot control through complex versus chaotic systems and so on. It's like we have all that knowledge. But what's not happening is that it's not being put into place. So it's like academics are talking about it a lot, but it's not happening. And the reason it's not happening is because essentially what it does is it's trying to take away, it's taking away that ability to reduce things into numbers, into to clear ways of communicating perhaps what a risk or an issue might be that's very useful for policymakers and key government decision makers. And essentially what it comes down to is politics. Quite simply, our political system, both, I know definitely in the UK, but for many countries around the world, just does not accommodate a complex approach. It is not able to be agile and think on its feet. It is neither able to think about long-term issues such as climate change, as we've seen over the last 40 odd years, and be able to long-term plan for that and build in things gradually over time. it's just a system that is fighting against itself, and consequently everyone else is trying to scramble around to make it work. But that's the fundamental issue, is that the government and our policy and the way our decisions are made are not supporting the complexity approach, which is ultimately what we need. And there are some very successful examples of where that has been done, and there are some countries that are doing it better than others. But ultimately, I'm going to be that really annoying person that says ultimately it always comes down to the politics. And we can see that most disasters that happen in the natural hazard world are not because of the hazard. It's because of political inability to respond quickly, prepare, or even like consider, oh, you're human beings, like in 1902 in Montpellier, Martinique, where they were like, we're having an election the next day, we're not going to evacuate our entire town. The next day, the volcano erupted and everybody died except for a prisoner who was buried underground. So it's like that is the level at which politics basically is putting itself first before humankind. And that, to me, it's one of many, but it's one very clear avenue that I think needs to be resolved.
Given that we're all throwing quotes at each other, I'm going to bring a couple more quotes in because I love quotes. This is one from an academic's Boylan to Hart, 2003. Most man-made disasters and violent conflicts are preceded by incubation periods during which policymakers misinterpret, are ignorant of, or flat out ignore repeated indications of impending danger. And then going to Charles Perrow, who everybody will know about, or many people know, normal accidents, and looking at 3 Mile Island. Time and again in the story of 3 Mile Island, warnings are ignored, unnecessary risks taken, sloppy work done, deception and downright lying practiced. Are we sort of actively creating the environment in which bad things can happen for whatever reason that might be? But I agree with you absolutely that we need to differentiate between the event and the crisis, and the crisis is very, very much man-made. Toby Harris, who is the president of the chair of the National Preparedness Commission and was president of the ISRM for 5 years, had a phrase called NIMTO, not in my term of office. And that was very much it. But the thing about it is, Karina, that is the way we operate. We can't complain about it. That is the democratic process. And we said that we need more democracy. Unfortunately, that's part of the package that comes with it. And I think you're right. We need to find a workaround. Ian, let's bring you in very quickly, and then we'll come to Duncan.
Hi, everybody. Yes, well, thank you there. Those Karina and yourself have covered a lot of what I was going to suggest. Essentially, warnings they only work if people and politicians listen. And invariably, from my previous experience and life experience, there are always plenty of warnings. We just choose to ignore them. And a lot of that is down to when I think you have ideological belief biases begin to impact on decision-making on the decision-making processes. And it is so sad because you can see what's going to happen miles and miles away. It's inevitable. And I could talk, as you know, David, on this subject quite a while. But one of the things that one of the few things that I do think we ought to focus on as risk management and in this particular arena is essential outcomes. One of the best pieces of work and toolkits that I've seen used is the National Preparedness Commission guidelines on for preparing for a resilient society. Sorry about that. Got a bit of a tickle. And I think that's a really great starting point, along with Maslow, basement level 1 and 2. That is our job, surely, to work from there. And we can only give information that other people can then choose or choose to accept or not to accept or act on. David, that's all.
Thanks, Ian. I think it comes down to, as you said, there are warnings. These things do not happen suddenly. COVID did not happen suddenly. We should have been ready for it way before that happened. And of course, the thing about COVID is, as a pandemic, COVID is only a mid-level pandemic. It's not serious. It has a morbidity rate of about 1%. Ebola has a morbidity rate of 50%. So I mean, if we'd had sort of an R recreation spread rate of COVID combined with the morbidity rate of Ebola, that would have been bad. But actually, we just weren't ready. I mean, that was the thing about it. We weren't ready.